Joe returns to New York at the start of season 5 of You. He credits Kate for helping him recover, preserving his track record, and bringing him and his son Henry home again. Kate unveils a new children's nonprofit during the most recent occasion. The Lockwood Board, however, despises Kate's generosity with their financial resources. Despite the fact that there is someone in the bookshop, he is worried because he believes spirits are following him. Moving on to the hit article, the lad thinks Forbes has an insider. Kate is the only person who supports Teddy, thus, he has an equal interest in preventing it. Regan is the first person Joe and Teddy suspect. She denounces being the mole, but the siblings argue. Regan finds it unsettling that Joe watches in silence. Joe approaches Maddie privately because she seduces him, making her the next target. She makes it clear that Kate's course is wearing her down. Maddie accuses Joe of concealing his true self and acting like he's craving something more when he backs Kate. Even though this bothers him, he searches through her phone while she isn't around. He discovers a text with a clandestine plan where Maddie, Regan, and Bob want to expel Kate after the publication of the piece. Bob admits to being the mole when Kate confronts him in the interim. Kate lets Joe kill Bob even though she knows it would ruin everything around them. Joe doesn't waste any time in taking pleasure in Bob's terrified expression. He fabricates a suicide and says he exaggerated about the pipeline in the fictitious death certificate. Bronte is shocked when Joe hands her the store's keys at the conclusion of episode 1. They wind up discussing the book she had picked up. Abruptly, he offers her a job at Mooney's. Interesting. After that, he goes home and gives Kate a kiss. He praises Kate for helping him realize that he is not obliged to hide who he really is in order to lead an excellent life with her. As Joe cleans up the bookshop for its relaunch in episode 2, following that, the episode shifts to Joe's house. The TV switches to a report on Bob and Kate, and Henry hastily shuts it off as he exits the room to get his belongings. When Joe and Kate get to the school, Joe is prepared to confront Henry's assailant, only to discover that Henry initiated the altercation by striking Regan's daughter, Gretchen. Kate advises Joe to destroy the pages of the paper he wrote in his fantasies about slaying Bob before she leaves, now that Bob is truly gone. As Joe and Henry arrive home, Kate is preparing to have supper with Regan and her husband in an attempt to calm Regan down. Another tap on the door interrupts the group. Here comes Maddie and Kenton, her date, who have accepted Regan's invitation to provide emotional assistance. Regan addresses the elephant in the room right away as the family gathers for supper. Kate starts out by proposing that they all travel to the Hamptons as a family, just like they did as children. Bronte is imprisoned in a glass chamber when Joe arrives at Mooney's. He asks her why she entered the room after he had made it clear she wasn't supposed to. After unlocking the door, he informs her that she has been sacked. After speaking with Bronte, Joe decides to take matters into his own hands and devises a strategy to target Regan. After discovering that Teddy was ostensibly joking about the video, considering that Regan is the last individual to go and always comes late, Joe gets ready to implement his strategy at work. Regan calls Kate to inform her that she is filing complaints against Joe. After Regan makes it plain to Kate that she will be held accountable, Joe panics and rushes back to Mooney's. Joe mistakenly captured a different twin because, to his astonishment, the door was still shut. Teddy, Griffin Matthews, tells Kate that Lasney holds the secret to overthrowing Regan. When Kate goes to speak with her half-sister, she finds Regan sobbing on the couch and Harrison leaving the house. Kate is ecstatic. She was contacted by security who discovered her husband, who was half-naked, imprisoned in a closet at the time of Joe's kidnapping of Maddie. She deduced that Maddie and Harrison had been having separate relationships for years because her twin's phone was on the surface of the floor of the workstation. Now that the family is aware of the affair, he uses it to his advantage by assuring Maddie that she and Harrison are at liberty to go missing together. It turns out that Gretchen is Maddie and Regan's surrogate, and she refers to her as her child. He takes into account that he should just kill her. Joe feels awful about going inside the cage to administer diabetes medication to her. Regan announces that Maddie will be giving her identical sister the ability to vote on the board, going live from Maddie's social media accounts while posing as her in order to avoid the controversy. She had the potential to become Regan, which is what Joe needed as motivation for his Maddie dilemma. While she was younger, she acknowledged that she saw herself in Beck's work, and she did come here since Beck was employed here. When Bronte wants Joe to tell her about her, he does so and even mentions that they had a brief romance. He ends by stating that it was tragic and that he wished he had murdered Dr. Nikki in order to keep Beck alive. Then, when Bronte asks if he has eaten at home, he admits he hasn't. She points out to him that she is incapable of managing a romantic relationship. She now helps Joe recognize the gaps in his marital relationships. Joe is mulling over Bronte at the start of episode 4. However, he is aware that he cannot end his marriage for Henry's benefit. George and Joe are content and Henry enjoys his therapy. Kate, on the other hand, decides in order to get what she wants, she will fire Regan for misappropriation of funds. Kate brings up the issue with Regan in the meanwhile. Regan, however, has the advantage because she is aware that Joe killed Bob and Rice. She won't say anything if Kate quits. Bronte wants Joe to read her most recent work, and Joe likes the writing about a male following a lady against her will and a poisonous romantic affection. Joe suggests he'd get rid of the guy. She says it's satisfying to get rid of perpetrators. Kate chooses to quit after telling Joe about Regan's most recent attacks. She rejects his attempt to request her to commit murder. She hates herself for causing Bob's death. Joe can't be her assassin and knight in shining armor. The next day, Joe goes downstairs where he discovers that Maddie's insulin dose had killed Regan. Maddie enters the room posing as Regan just as Kate is ready to step down. She declares her resignation and transfers Regan's voting privileges to herself. Teddy is brought on board, but things are not going well. Kate challenges Joe and rejects his claims that he forced Regan to retreat. Their marriage is on the rocks, and he is irritated because she doesn't like his ideas. Joe and Bronte are in Bronte's apartment at the beginning of episode 5. Kate isn't giving him much consideration after his night with Bronte since it gives him more time for his adulterous activities. When Bronte receives a call and conceals the phone from him, Joe is trying to figure out how to encourage her to show him more of herself. In an attempt to help her unwind and spark her creativity, Joe employs a spa therapist to give her a massage and prepares for food purchases to be brought. Kate confides in Teddy after hearing of Joe's adultery, expressing her annoyance at being duped into slandering him and making references to his past actions. Teddy questions her about it. After returning to Moniz, Bronte resumes her writing and places the papers on Joe's desk for him to peruse. When Kate approaches Joe with her concerns that he annihilated his first wife and indicates that she is aware that he is having an affair with his retailer, the situation becomes extremely contentious. Joe, who is always manipulating, redirects the subject back to Kate and says that she was okay with who he was as long as it worked for her. Joe walks away to go to sleep at his store after Kate tells him she wants the dissolution of the marriage because she doesn't feel secure behind him. Teddy is informed by Kate after she has discovered the facts about Maddie and Regan. He is obviously upset that Kate has refused to call the police, and as a result, Kate tells Teddy all the details about how Joe annihilated Bob for her and how she allowed him to frame a little girl for Reyes' murder. Joe takes out Clayton, and two ladies storm into the house. One of them is broadcasting live the whole thing on TikTok live audience that Joe Goldberg killed her body. Joe informs Bronte that he must go immediately, but Bronte surprises him by pointing her taser at him. As the episode comes to a close, Joe is left wondering what occurred since it appears like Bronte created a trap for him. Episode 6 commences with a flashback to Beck's romantic days with Joe. Joe is currently behind bars for the murder of Clayton, but his only grievance is that Bronte deceived him and Kate is now helping him. When interrogated by the police, Bronte confesses on wanting justice for Beck. Kate is irritated with Joe. She snaps at him, calling him pitiful. He becomes hostile when she doesn't believe him. While completing the bail documents, she cautiously informs him that she had him unintentionally sign a child custody contract stating that he is unfit to care for Henry. He chases after her in a fit range, but there is well equipped security, and she dismisses him after warning him to act appropriately. Publishers of newspapers are announcing Joe's detention in episode 7. He describes himself as misinterpreted and expresses concerns that Henry would notice. He believes that someone is responsible for the destruction of Henry's future and he is incensed with Bronte and Kate for it. Joe only needs to be kind and change public sentiment in Henry's favor to get custody. Joe is frantic because he thinks Kate is conspiring with Henry against him. Likewise, Sloan, Kate's attorney, urges her to openly condemn Joe in order to change popular sentiment. Teddy wants her to call the police as well. However, Kate declines as she is aware that Joe might blame her for the killing of Bryce and Bob, as well as Nadia's wrongful incarceration. Her plan is to take a backseat and let Joe make his own mistakes. Bronte is attempting to work things out with Joe while Dom and Phoenix are upset about his will. Using all of their documents, Dom and Phoenix attempt to recruit Bronte. When she refuses, she claims Joe is not guilty and the argument escalates. Dom accuses Bronte of having delusions after she explains the self-defense philosophy. Dom expels Bronte after realizing she is a forlorn and in love with Joe. At last, Bronte shows up because she wants to apologize to Joe. Joe searches for Bronte after finishing up because he wants to know whether she saw the interview he conducted. He arrives just in time to discover Bronte being chloroformed by a guy named Dane. Joe slams Dane's head into a van and in the process saves Bronte, and as we find later, Bronte wakes up in his bed shackled at the end of the episode. Folia Da, the 8th episode of You Season 5, opens with Joe questioning if he must determine whether Bronte genuinely loves him. If not, she is merely the one who destroyed his life. Bronte is trying to feel Dane in the meantime. Despite his initial disdain for her, they eventually end up becoming close because of their ailing mothers. He nearly escapes until he enrages Bronte by declaring that in future he would only target deserving ladies. Phoebe persuades Nadia to believe Kate when she is in London. She clarifies that Kate is very devoted and will defend Nadia. Henry, nevertheless, phones Joe because he doesn't like what Kate is saying about him. Joe is enraged, but Kate ends the call by revealing that he is going down for the killings we saw previously in previous seasons. He becomes furious and lashes out at Harrison only to discover that the guy has been persuaded. He is irritated that no one ever seems to comprehend him, and it is detrimental that he witnesses Bronte releasing Dane. Bronte awaits Joe when he gets home, with the caveat that they would be observing his every action. She has released Dane. She needed her independence even though she understood it was all an exercise. She tells him that she loves Joe and that his desire to murder for protection is sufficient. He is not required to kill people for her. She believes that his propensity toward violence is a result of his mother's neglect of him. She reassures him that she won't abandon him and that he doesn't need to murder others to show his affection. They ultimately find themselves sharing a bed once he is transferred. When they realize she restored him, they chuckle. Nadia consents to come forward and Kate finally presents the evidence she has against Joe. Kate is prepared to accept the repercussions of her behavior, and the attorney reassures her that their case is strong. The only warning is that establishing a solid case against Joe may take several years. Then, out of compassion rather than to win Bronte's affection, he murders Dane. Additionally, he does it since he knows she won't flee. Kate realizes they can't wait for years and makes up her decision to murder him. You, Season 5, Episode 9, opens with Joe and Bronte staying at home and contemplating about their potential future attached to one another. In fact, he intends to pop the question and propose. His attorney believes they have a strong case to have custody reversed since he was duped. In order to keep up any unfinished business, however, Joe uses a confidential tip to have Maddie and Harrison incarcerated. Bronte accuses Kate of being hypocritical for employing Joe to kill Bob, since she thinks she understands the real Joe. Kate walks away unfazed. Nadia realizes that Joe is so irrational that he will never take responsibility of his misdeeds, and they continue to argue downstairs. She brings in Marianne in an attempt to frighten him. While Joe is glad to see her alive, she is not as delighted. He responds that he protected her and protects women from abusers when she accuses him of damaging her. She is happy that he will ultimately perish and accuses him of abuse. He realizes that he will never let him go when she makes a mistake. After all of this, a distraught Bronte goes home. Joe is still agitated by Kate, but he won't come clean, having heard enough. Nadia chooses to use a pistol to murder him so he may experience the agony. Kate chooses to murder Joe as retribution and brings them home. But when he devours and pulls out the key, Joe reveals another key to the cage concealed in his arm. He shoots Kate in the stomach with Nadia's revolver when she returns. Maddie, she snaps at Joe for taking advantage of her and locks the cellar door. Even when he tells her about Kate weeping, she remains skeptical of him. She exits after setting the business on fire. Bronte realizes the fire and dashes in as she is leaving. Kate is not responding, so she attempts to save her. Joe believes that Bronte has come to help him, so she saves him to maintain her cover. He says he is tired of waiting and pops the question to her, proposing in the middle of all this when they are both outdoors. As You, Season 5, Episode 10 opens, Joe and Bronte are leaving for Canada in order to hide. Will has been asked to assist him with the travel documents, and he has also contacted Henry to reassure him that he will return shortly. He is concerned about Nadia's potential reaction to his disclosure of Love's homicide on tape. Even though Bronte is anxious, she cooperates as she can't murder Joe without revealing him and exacting revenge on Beth. In the final moments, they are left patiently awaiting for the passports while camping in a vacant residence. She says he repeatedly did this to all of his partners and detests the fact that he stripped away her ability to speak and ethical standards. In order to get Beck's book reissued with her original voice, she also demands that he eliminate anything he inserted as part of her retaliation. In order to view Bronte amidst the stars during the boat journey, Joe has her stand while he rests down. He continues to talk about how lovely everything is and how Bronte is the center of his existence. Bronte looks strong and understands that this is the reason she initially subsequently fell in love with Joe. Joe uses love as a weapon because he understands its potency. However, she is aware that he cannot deceive her once again. We learn another reason why Bronte could have ended up in love with Joe as she draws her pistol on him. After he wants to hold someone accountable, he strikes Bronte. Bronte phones the police after her and Joe argue while the two are wounded. As he is trying to go, he murders a police officer, but she stops him with a pistol. He implores her to murder him, but she declines. She averts his onslaught by unintentionally opening fire on him. Following this, we learn that Joe was found guilty of killing Beck, Love, Benji, and Peach, among many more victims. Nikki is now free. As they appear on podcasts and try to expose other abusers, the vigilantes gain popularity. Nadia works on helping women who suffer from PTSD and eventually writes a book. In his last minutes, Joe receives some fun letters, and is ultimately confined up where he belongs.